What's up everyone, this is Matt from Made with Matt, and today we're back with another video where we're going to be building out an authentication flow with Firebase. If this is your first time using Firebase, this is a great video for you, as we're going to be keeping it very simple and building out just a 2-page React Native app with basic authentication using Firebase so that you can quickly get it up and running and quickly understand how to use the service. So as you can see here, a quick demo, we're going to have one page where you can enter an email and a password. You could click login or register. If you click register, it'll create a new user on Firebase. And if you click login, it's going to log in as an existing user. Once we're logged in, we'll get to the home screen where here we could see some user information such as their email. And in this case, that's all we've passed in. So that's all we're going to show. Now, if you click the button at the bottom there, sign out, we can sign out and we could log in or register as a new user. Let's jump into the code. In this video, we'll be using Expo and we'll also be using React Navigation. We'll be using the Stack Navigator so that we could have our login screen and our home screen, and so we can jump between the two. So we can jump into VS Code and say Expo init Firebase auth. Now we'll be using the blank template, so just hit enter on that. Once that's done, you can copy this command over here to jump into your newly created directory. We could then run expo start, and that's going to open up the Expo localhost in our browser. Now, if you don't have any simulators set up, so iOS or Android, you could scan this QR code on your phone, and it's going to open up the Expo Go app, and you could run the app there. So that's really easy to use and simple to set up. But for the sake of this video, I'll be opening up the iOS simulator. Once that's done, we'll see our app open over here on the right, and we could get started by splitting this terminal, which you could also do by just clicking the plus up here, and we'll start adding some packages. So the first thing we'll need is React Navigation. So if we jump into the documentation and we scroll down a little bit, we can copy over their installation steps and paste them into our terminal to install the packages we need for navigation. We could jump back, scroll down, and make sure that we install the dependencies for an Expo managed project, as that's what we're using. So we'll copy those over, paste them in, hit enter. Lastly, for the navigation packages, we can scroll down, go to the next page, and in here we can install the native Stack Navigator library, as that's what we'll use to navigate or to jump between the login screen and the home screen. Awesome. Now the next package we'll need is for Firebase. So we can go ahead and type in expo install Firebase, and it's important here that you do it using expo and not npm or yarn, as that might cause some issues. Once that's done, we could close off this terminal. We're no longer going to need it, and we could jump into our app.js file. So this is where we'll set up the navigation. So if we jump back to the documentation for React Navigation, we can see that this is a sample Stack Navigator with one screen. So we could copy some of this code to get started. So the first thing we'll need is the navigation container and the create native Stack Navigator. So I'll go ahead, copy and paste those into the top here. Next thing we'll need is the create Stack Navigator method, where we say const stack equals create stack native Stack Navigator that creates the stack. And then we can also copy this over here and replace our return with that. For now, we're just going to comment out the first screen, as we'll go ahead and create those files right now. So we could save that, and we'll get an error because we don't have any screens in here. So let's go ahead and make those. So you create a new folder, call it screens. In here, we'll create two files. The first one called login screen.js, and the second called home screen.js. In here, I'm going to type in rnfes, which is React Native Functional Export Component with a style sheet. And I'm able to do that because I have this extension installed. So if you want to install this as well, it's really great to speed up your workflow with React Native. So go ahead and type that, and that creates this boilerplate code for us. And in here we could say home screen. Save that, and for the login screen, we could do the same thing, and we could say login screen. Could save that and jump back to app.js, where we can uncomment this stack.screen, name this one login, and change the component to the login screen, and we just need to make sure that it gets imported. We can copy and paste that line and change the next one to the home screen, and once again, just make sure that it gets imported. If we save that, we're going to see the login screen show up. So this is going to be the login screen. We can just change some of the options in here so that we don't see the header. So header shown is false, just like that, so that we could have everything centered and clean. So we'll get started with our login screen by jumping into the file and changing this topmost view to a keyboard avoiding view. So make sure that gets imported from React Native like that. And in here, we can add a style, which is going to be styles.container. And we can also set the behavior equal to padding. And what this is going to do is when we have some text input elements over here, when we click them, the keyboard is going to come up. And sometimes with React Native, the keyboard ends up covering the input fields. By doing this, we're making sure that that won't happen. You could save that and you'll see nothing actually changes. But let's get started with building out the UI. So in here, we could have a view. We'll give this one a style of styles.inputContainer. And this is the one that's going to hold our text inputs. So we could say text input. And in here, we could pass in a couple parameters or props. So first one is going to be email. We'll give it a value, which right now we're not going to set as anything. We'll say onChange text. And here we get the text. Every time the text changes in our input, it spits out this text variable, which we could then use in a function afterwards to change the value of this text input. For now, we'll leave that blank as well. And we could give it a style of styles.input. So let's comment out these two lines just for now, so we keep it simple at the beginning. You could copy and paste this text input, and the second one is going to be password. And what we'll want to add for the password is secure text entry. And what that's going to do is we could see it up here. Okay, so it's too high to click. Let's go ahead and create the style for the container, just so that we could center everything and so that we could see it. So we'll say justify content will be center, and align items will also be center. Now we can also add a flex of 1, and we'll see both the fields show up in the middle here. So here we could say test, we could see that it's working, and if we type in a password here, you'll see that it shows up dotted like that, and that's because of the secure text entry. Now that we've got that set up, we could create a new view, and this one's going to have a style of styles.button container. And this one's going to contain our buttons. So we could say touchable opacity. The touchable opacity is going to have an onPress handler, which right now we're just going to leave as blank, so an empty anonymous function. And it's also going to have a style, so styles.button. In here, the button's just going to contain some text. And for this one, we could say login and give it a style of styles.button. And we could copy paste all of this. And for this one, we can say register. So in here, styles.button, we can actually change this to an array where we're going to have styles.button and styles.button outline. And that gives us the ability to inherit all the styles from button and all of them from button outline. So we're basically putting two styles on our button. And for this one, we'll change it to button outline text, just like that. So if we save that, we could see we have our two input fields, and then we have our two buttons. So let's get started with styling everything. And to do that, I'm going to double click on all our styles and hold down the Option key. And I'm on Mac, and what that's going to do is it's going to let me multi-select. That way I could select all of them at once in a really easy way. Perfect, and I'm also just going to edit one style, which is the one over here for login. We'll change that to button text, and we'll go add that in right over here. We could get started with the input container, where we're going to change the width to 80%, like that, and then in the input itself, we'll change the background color to white so that we could see what's going on. Awesome. We can also set a padding. So padding horizontal, we'll set it to 15, and padding vertical, we'll set it to 10. Now that's going to give us a little bit more space to play around with. Now we could also change the border radius to 10, like that, and give them a margin top of 5. Now that's going to space them out a little bit. We can move down to the button container. For these, we'll give them a width of 60%. So they're going to be just a little bit smaller. We'll justify the content in the center and align the items in the center as well, so that we can make sure that they're centered on the screen. And we'll give the container a margin top of 40, just to space it out a little bit. Now for the buttons, we'll have two different types. So the first one's going to have a background color of this hex value over here. So if we save that, we can see that it's this blue. We'll give it a width of 100% so that it takes up full 100% of that 60% in the container. We'll also give it some padding. So padding horizontal, we'll say 15. And actually we could set this as padding as a whole. Save that. Border radius, we'll set that to 10. And now we can move on to the button outline. So for the button outline, we'll give it a background color of white, just like that. We're going to give it a margin top of 5, just to space it out from the button above. We'll give it a border color of this nice blue that we have above, and we'll give it a border width of 2. Oops, of 2. There we go. Now jumping back to the button, we're also going to say align items center. That way the text gets centered. Now for the button text, we'll set the color to white. We'll set the font weight to 700, and we'll set the font size to 16. Now for the button outline text, we can copy that over, and instead of having the color as white, we'll set it to that blue once again. Cool, so the next thing we'll do is set up our states so that we can uncomment these. So at the top here, we can say const and open and close an array. This one's going to be email. Set email is going to be equal to use state. And right now it's just going to be an empty string, and we can copy that over and do the same thing for the password. So set password, and it's going to be an empty string. If this is your first time using state, I definitely recommend you check out my video on building out a to-do list. It's a great way to learn how to use state and some other basic concepts with React Native. Now we could go uncomment the first text input over here. So the value is going to be email, and every time the text changes, we can set the email to that text. Now we could do something very similar for password. So password, and in here we'll say set password to be password. And we could save that. Now we could start playing around with it. And we could see that password isn't working, and that's because I put password instead of text. Save that, try it out again. Oops. Awesome. Now that we've got our UI set up, we can jump over to Firebase and create a new project. So we'll give this one a name of Firebase auth, click continue, remove the Google Analytics, we won't need it for this project. Once we're into the project, we'll click this little web icon over here to add our app. So we'll call it the same thing, Firebase auth, register our app, and it's going to give us the Firebase SDK, which we can copy paste into our app. So we can copy all of this. We can go open up a new file called firebase.js, and we can paste it in and save. Now in here, we're going to change this import to import star as Firebase from Firebase. And down here, we're going to change this to say let app if firebase.apps.length is equal to 0. Then we'll say app is equal to, and we'll copy this over to the top here. And we'll say firebase.initialize app with this Firebase config. If the app has already been initialized, which would mean the length is greater than 0, then we'll say app is equal to firebase.app, like that. We're also going to want auth, so we'll say const auth is equal to firebase.auth, like that, and we can also export auth from this file and save. It's important to note here that I'm using Firebase version 8.2.3. If you're using a different version, especially version 9, you're going to have different syntax, so make sure you double check that. Now jumping back to our Firebase console, we could say continue to console, click authentication either over here or up here, and we'll click the get started button. From here, we'll go to the first one, email and password, edit the configuration, and click enable, so that we can start using this. Now we can go to the users tab and we can see that it's empty. So this is what we're going to be using for this tutorial to create our users. So under the login screen, we could create a new function called handle signup. And here we'll say auth, which we'll need to import from our Firebase file that we just created. Auth.create user with email and password. And in here, we'll pass in the email and the password that we have stored in state. So that's going to go ahead and create the user with the email and the password that we've provided. And once that's done, we'll say .then we'll get the user credentials. And in here, we could say const user is equal to user credential dot user. And we could just console log that. And we could console log the email just to be sure that it's working. We'll also want to say dot catch error. And in here, we'll have an alert that spits out the error message just in case this didn't work. So we could save that, and now we can copy our handle signup method name and move down to our second touchable opacity. So this is the register one, and replace the anonymous function with our handle signup. So jumping back to our users over here, we could see that it's empty if we add a new one. So, if I go ahead and add matt@test.com with a password of password and click register, we can open up our terminal and see that we've successfully created our user since it console logged user.email. Now in here, you're gonna have to refresh to see it. But there we go, we have our user. So that's how simple it is to create a new user. Now, if we want to go log in, we could say const handle login. Once again, create a function for it, and we could do something very similar. So here we'll say auth.signin with email and password, and we'll pass in the email, we'll pass in the password, And this will do the exact same thing that we've done up here. So we could actually copy this code, paste it, and instead of just logging the user, we could say logged in with user.email, and we can actually copy this over up here and say registered. Now we'll go connect this handle login to the on press of the first touchable opacity, just like that. The next thing we'll want to do is whenever a user is logged in and they're on this screen, right now the way we have it configured is they're kind of stuck on this screen. They don't get navigated to a new screen, and if we were to quit and reopen the app, it would just kind of stay here even though they're logged in. So what we could do is add what's called a listener. And what that listener is going to do is listen to Firebase, listen to the users to see if any of them are logged in, and then we can do something if the user is actually logged in. So we can create a use effect over here so that it runs when the component mounts. And just pass in an empty array so it only runs once at the beginning. And we'll say const, or actually we could start by saying auth.on auth state changed. Here we'll get a user, and we could say if user, we can say navigation dot navigate to home. So what this is going to do is if we have a user, then we're going to use our navigation to navigate to our home screen. Now we'll need to import something to get this navigation variable. So we could say const navigation is equal to use navigation, and just make sure that imports properly from React Navigation core. So we could do it like that, and this is going to work, but if we want to optimize this a little bit more, something that's really good practice to do is saying unsubscribe is equal to that, and over here returning unsubscribe. Now what this is going to do is when we leave this screen, it's going to unsubscribe from this listener so that it doesn't keep pinging it when it shouldn't. So we could save that and see what happens. Now here I'm getting a little warning, and that's because over here in use navigation, I forgot my brackets. So I could save that, and there we go. Now we see that we've logged in to our app, and it automatically redirects us to the home screen. So now we could jump into our home screen and start building this one out. So we'll delete this text. We'll give this view a style of container. And in here we'll have a text which is going to contain the email. And we'll have a touchable opacity, which will also have a text inside, and this one's going to say sign out. So let's give this some styling. So this is going to have style is equal to styles.button, and this one's going to be styles.button text. Now in here we can start building out the style, so we'll give it a flex of 1, a justify content of center, align items of center as well. Could save that. Next, for the button and the button text, we could actually go copy over the styles from the login screen just to save a little bit of time. Just like that, and save. And we could just change the button width down to 60%, like that. We'll also add a little bit of margin top on the button. There we go. So now what we want is we want the email of the user we're currently logged in as to show up over here. So to do that, it's actually really simple. We'll just need auth and make sure once again that it imports it properly. You could say current user dot email. If we save that, we could see the email show up. And the reason we put a question mark here is that this could sometimes be undefined. And if we don't put the question mark, then no matter what, it's always going to look for this email, and then it's going to crash our app. But if we have the question mark, it kind of tells JavaScript, this might be undefined. If it's undefined, don't check for the email. Just leave it as undefined, and that's okay. The next thing we'll want to do is create a function so that when we click sign out, it actually signs the user out. So let's go ahead and create that up here. Const handle sign out. And for this one, we'll say auth dot sign out. And that's it. It's that easy. So here we could have a dot then, which will go navigation. Oops, navigation dot replace, and we could say login. Now, as always, we want to catch any errors. So catch error alert error dot message, just like that. Now, if we run this, we'll get an error that navigation is not defined. So like we did previously, we could say const navigation is equal to use navigation. Make sure it imports properly from React Navigation Core. And we could go attach this to the touchable opacity in the on press and save that. Now, if we click sign out, there we go. It automatically brings us back to this screen. So if we jump back to the login screen, over here in the use effect, instead of navigating to home, we're actually going to replace it. Now what that's going to do, if we try it out again, is when we click login, it should remove this login back button over here so that we can't actually go back like that. Let's try that again. There we go. Awesome. So just to summarize, we created this login screen where we can either log in or register. So if we create a new account over here, we'll create elon@test.com. We can register. That's going to bring us to the home screen and show us elon@test.com as the sign-in user. And if we go refresh our users tab in our Firebase console, we could see our new user show up over here. Now we can also sign out from the home screen, and that's going to bring us back here. And then we could go back and log in as that user. So if you enjoyed this walkthrough, this tutorial with Firebase and simple authentication, hit that thumbs up button, leave a comment down below telling me what you liked about it and what you'd like to see next, and definitely hit that subscribe button.